Welcome back to our channel, everyone. My name is Joe Buskins. This is our family's boat shop, and I'm excited because we got a video you guys have been requesting a lot, and we're finally going to be doing a Gelcoat color match. So what I thought we would do is, obviously, if you're professional and you work in a boat shop, you may be buying something other than like one of the little Gelcoat repair kits like I have in my hand. But if you were to go and just buy just this pigment set that like the pros would use, for one thing, you would never use all of it in your typical repair job. It's gonna take a tiny amount of pigment to get your colors typically. And the cost of these pigments is well beyond the cost of just what a Gelcoat repair kit would be. Now, if you have a bigger job or want to get into doing this professionally, you may want to contact some of your fiberglass suppliers and get the full spectrum of colors so that you can do it. But what I thought we would do is go ahead and break open this little kit, because I bet you guys have probably seen this at some of your marine hardware stores and thought, man, I don't even know what's in that thing. Really, is it worth, you know, $50 to $100 to get the basics? And in a lot of ways, I would say the answer is yes. For the average DIYer, you certainly can get your average repair job done. Now you can see in here we got your base pigments. I believe we got a brown, black, red, and then a blue, yellow, and we've got some white there as well. We've got a little bit of hardener or catalyst, or you guys will hear me talk about MEKP. You got some solvent or a cleaner. There we go. And then we've got some little mixing cups, and we've got some Gelcoat paste. So we're going to just basically be using some of this, but I'm also going to be trying to tie in, if you guys are maybe doing it a little larger scale, I've actually got a full gallon of base white Gelcoat. I've got a gallon of black. And then if you're going with a deeper tone color, you'd have to have a neutral Gelcoat. And quite honestly, sometimes we may just contact the manufacturer if we need like a vibrant color and a good quantity of it. So one cool thing about these little kits, and I may just lay this out right here and just scroll over that very completely and slowly so that you guys can see the combination. So for example, to the far left, if that is your desired color that you want, you would start with the base color, and then these are the tinting colors. So again, I hope that is helpful, and maybe you can pause if need be and or zoom in. All right, so what we're going to do, and if you look on the table, we've got all the basics kind of covered. You're going to need a good mixing board, which I've actually had a couple questions and comments. What is the 228? We actually used to have a pontoon rental business as well as our charter business, and some of the signage on it had our lettering, and I found that this makes excellent material. It's just like a little polymer sheet. It's easy to cut, easy to shape, easy to hold, and these make great materials. So you guys may be able to go to your local sign shop and pick up some of this, and I'm sure there are other options as well. Now I am going to I may even post this somewhere else so that you guys can go back and look at that in more detail. Obviously, putting on some PPE is a good idea. I don't know that I'll be wearing a respirator today because this is pretty low volume, but some good, I'm wearing latex gloves today. Some people like nitrile. There's other brands. I tend to lean toward the latex. And this is going to be fairly light stuff today, but you can even double glove sometimes. That will help. Now, one of the reasons it's been taking me a minute to get to making this video is I needed kind of an off-white, older piece of material, something I could do a color match on and kind of show the samples. And quite honestly, I just didn't really have anything at the moment around the shop. So I actually got this from my brother, Mark. You'll hear me call him Marky Mark. He's in a bunch of my videos when we were building the boat. He actually had this at his boat yard, and he said it's off an old Bertram, I believe. And he's like, man, you are welcome. Now, we've also had a little ding right there that I've ground out with a little rotary tool, and we're going to be showing this material here is kind of like a mylar sheet, like a clear plastic, and we will show why and what you're going to do with that. So I think what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to bust open some of these materials, and I kind of just want to show you guys what the basics are. Now this one, you're going to have a little end you're going to have to punch out there. Be careful with the razor knife, obviously, but sometimes I'll just make an X. An X marks the spot. And this, what's interesting is with this repair kit, you got basically a clear gel paste that you can pigment or tint. Now, I'll be super honest with you, most of the time when we're doing repair work, I would say probably 90% of the boats out there are going to be white or off-white in some variation. And I will usually, in that case, for bigger repair jobs, we will start with just some base white, which you can see I've poured some black and some white out for you guys to see. Now, one thing, if you've never done this, that can be kind of surprising to a beginner or a novice, is that it does not take that much pigment to really shift the colors around a bunch. And so your base colors, or your primary colors, as you guys may know, is going to be blue, yellow, and red are going to be your primary colors. And this kit, again, everything is brand new, so I'm going to have to bust open. Be careful with the razor knife there, folks. They can jump in there and get you, but I'm just going to give a little dab of material. So what we got is also some little, they call them like tongue depressors, just like little wood stirring sticks. You can buy these in bulk, and almost all of your fiberglass suppliers are going to have these. Now, if you're new to mixing colors, again, the color chart is going to help you, but your primary colors will get you just about where you always are going to need to be. If you go with a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow, for example, you're going to get orange, like an orange, obviously. And then you've got your yellow and your blue. You're going to get a green going on, almost like a turquoise there. And then, let's see, I get the trash can. I have a feeling we're going to go through a bunch of stirring sticks today. And then obviously, if you go a little bit of blue and red, you're going to get kind of a purplish, or maybe even like a navy blue. Kind of interesting how this all works. So if you got a bloat like that, almost a purple deep blue, or an orange tint, or a green or turquoise, there are going to be combinations of colors. And then obviously, like you can make a brown, for example, but most of these little kits also give you a brown and the white, which again, white is going to be the most common. I'm going to be very honest with you folks. Gelcoat color matching, it's as much of a art as it is a science. You can go by the chart, but sometimes they're just going to be plain straight up trial and error. And don't be afraid to get some of these materials and just get out in your shop or your little shed and kind of experiment a little bit with this kind of stuff. Or maybe the first ding or patch you try to match, do it somewhere up underneath the boat or somewhere that's kind of obscure. Which is kind of interesting because you can see this older hatch here. It makes me think that like when you are trying to match, you're gonna want a good light or a really good light source. Now, natural light is one of the best lights, and you can see today we've actually got the shop doors open. It's a nice spring morning. Now I've got a little handheld cordless light here, and it really brightens things up, but you can see it's a different tone than the natural light. And this LED light is a very blue light. It's a very high Kelvin, so it kind of makes the colors look a little different than they would in sunlight. You also, wherever the repair is on the boat, that is where you want to kind of take your color sample, or where you're trying to match to. You want to be close to that, because at the top of the boat, it's going to have more UV exposure, more sunlight exposure than, say, the bottom of the boat. And the color of the gel coat on the top of the boat versus the sides versus the bottom can vary. It's not going to be exactly the same. So wherever the damage is where you're going to want to focus your attention. And then if we have an older hatch, which that's what this is, and actually this older hatch had been painted. And if you can see here, that is a very, very off-white. That is very similar, matter of fact, to what some of the older Boston Whalers and the older Grady Whites are, a very, very off-white. But what we did is we actually sanded that paint off with a little more aggressive sandpaper, and then we used some 1200 grit and we wet sanded. So we just used our little spray bottle, we sprayed some water, we wet sanded this till we got, I hope the camera may pick that up. There's a pretty nice sheen on there. And then you guys, if you've seen some of our previous videos where we're doing wet sanding and compounding gel coat restoration type work, you guys know that I love the fleet wax. And what we'll try to do for you folks, I've been getting a lot of questions about where to buy these materials. We always, and we're trying to put a link below the video description. So if you kind of scroll up a little bit, you have the video description, and below that you'll have a link to all of the materials that we are using for most of our jobs. So what I'm going to do is go with a little bit of white, since we have basically a neutral paste. Now normally that's probably plenty. That might be a little even on the rich side. And there's a percentage, it's about 5% by volume if memory serves. You don't want to put too much pigment in, or it will affect the outcome of things. So let's do a little mixing and just see what we're getting there. And a little goes a long way, folks. I mean, big time. A little goes a long way. All right, just like that, we've got a white base that we can work off of. So obviously this hatch is kind of an off-white. Now you guys will notice every time I open one of the new containers, obviously razor knives you got to be careful with, but I want to be sure not to cross-contaminate any of the pigment from one to the other. So this has definitely got a yellowish, a brownish tint to it. Now sometimes what can happen is, man, you can put some pigment in and it goes an awful long way. So sometimes I will take a little bit of the material off to the side, and we will just make a little batch. Like say for example, I'm going to add a little bit of brown to one of these, just a bit. I mean, it does not take an awful lot. What we're trying to do is be sure you don't add too much at one time. All right. And again, folks, this is for you guys. Usually when we're doing this for like a job in the shop, we're using larger volumes of materials. I don't typically buy these little small kits. But again, when I started thinking about if you had to go buy like some MEKP, usually it comes in like a gallon. Sometimes it does come in smaller containers, and if you bought each one of these pigments, they would be well beyond $100 just for the pigments. Now, one of the first things I like to typically do is just got a baseline, and if you were to take just a little bit of this base white, and again, we have already wet sanded this, you can see that that is much whiter. Let's see if I can throw a little bit more. You know, sometimes that light will wash it out, but you can see that that is a much whiter, it's a true white, or kind of like what we would call a base white, which if you're lucky, some boats are actually very, very close to that color. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna take just a bit of the brown. We're gonna add a little bit of this brown paste, and that may be on the rich side. It does not take an awful lot of material to get that to really come around. You can see the streaks of color in there as we mix. Just take your time. Again, folks, and don't get frustrated. This is as much an art as it is a science. And it can take a minute to get things the way you want them. Clean sample. You're going to need a selection of these little stirring sticks for sure. You can definitely see we picked up a little brown, but it's definitely needs a little something else. So I'm leaning toward, in my experience, a lot of times you're going to need a little more yellow and maybe a touch of red. But that to me looks like we need some yellow in there. So here we go with the yellow. All right. And based on that, I think we need, still looking very yellow. Sometimes you can add some other pigments and pull some of that yellow out. I am going to go with a touch of red. We're kind of getting in the neighborhood now, I think. So let's see. Do another little. Now we are too dark by a pretty good margin, but we're kind of getting in the overall neighborhood. So what I've got here, folks, I've got another batch of just the white base, and we're going to cut in some of what we got into a larger amount of white. You're going to need to mix up more than you think you're going to need. And again, you may not want to drink too much caffeine the morning you're going to do this, and you may want to just take a deep breath if you've never done it before. Even for guys that do it all the time, it can test your patience a little bit. Now, of course, there are other options as well. Sometimes if you have a newer boat, you may just be inclined to go back to your dealership and get a factory match. There you go. Or there are companies that specialize in color matching if you've got an idea of what you need. So we're just going to blend that in and see where we are going with this. You don't want to mix all the gel coat you have in one go, because chances are you're going to have to cut it, dilute it, adjust it a little bit. Also, having more than one mixing board. I like something that's going to be a plastic, non-absorbing material versus, I would not recommend cardboard. What it'll do is cardboard will pull the solvents out of the gel coat. It'll dry it out. Same thing happens if you use plywood. So So I wouldn't do it. Try to find you a good sheet material, some kind of a plastic material. You may be able to go again to your local sign shop and just pick up some remnants. They may have some pieces. They may just give them to you, and I cut them out with either a razor knife or a... Okay. Now, if you want a time frame, again, we typically let our videos run pretty long. I've had days where it takes me an hour or more to get a match. So you can see here, we're definitely too dark. There's our original. Let me get another clean. So we're not cross-contaminating. We're trying. That definitely lightened it up a bit. Now, I did make an announcement or mention back a week or so ago that we were now going to be working or have a Patreon account. And a lot of folks don't understand what Patreon is. But basically, I'm going to continue making videos exactly like we've been making the videos. But what I've been having is a lot of folks that need more of my time that want to either email me or call me. And Patreon is a way for you guys to be able to do that. Here we go. One more little dab. Now, honestly, I think we're getting in the neighborhood of that pretty darn good. Now, this is another thing, you guys, we've talked about this. Perfect is nice. You're like, well, in a perfect world, everything would be perfect. But Gelcoat matching is really, really tough to get perfect. Even if you've done this a lot, occasionally you'll hit the nail on the head and it will look great right from the start. Other times you'll see a subtle difference, but it will be pretty much like if you know where the damage is, you could find it. But obviously, like if you got a chunk or a chip knocked out of your boat like that, and you've got exposed fiberglass material, if you're 90% of the way there on the color match, most people were not going to see it, and you're doing the job of sealing up the fiberglass. You're creating a water barrier to keep water from migrating into the glass fibers. And usually what will happen over time, the boat and the Gelcoat will weather a little bit and it'll blend. Now, on the subject of blending, when we're doing like professional level big structural repairs, that's not really what this is. This is more little chips and dings. There are additives. There's a company called Duratech that makes a very good clear high gloss additive, and a lot of times what we will do is we will fill a damaged area and then we will sand out kind of like a little apron around the perimeter, and then we will reduce our Gelcoat that we've custom matched by up to like 50%, and we will kind of feather. What that'll allow is we'll actually spray that thinned Gelcoat out, and some of the base color will actually transmit through the semi-transparent Gelcoat that you used. There's other companies make stuff like a product called Air Dry, but Duratech is one I've had good success with, and there are some others as well. So that's something to remember, but typically you wouldn't use it like in this application. So I think at this point, I don't want the video to run crazy long, but I think you guys have kind of got the gist of it, and some experimentation is going to happen, and don't be discouraged. But let me, now what we did is we ground that area out there with a little die grinder. I've wiped it off with some acetone, and I do want to show you folks what the clear plastic is for. Now normally at this point, if you're pretty happy with that, matter of fact, it's probably only going to take a third or half of that to actually do the repair. So you may want to take, say, a portion of it off to the side, put a little divot in there, and you would, at this point, be adding the MEKP, the catalyst or the activator. Now, that's a lot of activator right there for the amount of Gelcoat we got. I believe, if memory serves, again, these are tiny amounts, but it seems like it's 3 or 4 drops per teaspoon. But just remember, this has to be catalyzed for it to work properly. Now, many times, what you're gonna do is just take your blade after it's been catalyzed, and you should be able to get a pretty good wipe there. Sometimes you need to overfill. I'm going to put a little more. I'm going to put a little more in. That's fairly close to where we need to be. Now, this is where it can get a little trickier. Now, you can add to like more of a liquid gel coat, you can add like a sanding aid, which again, we get a lot of questions about what we call modifier C or the sanding aid, the wax solution. And again, that usually comes into play on the more liquid type gel coats. But on a little repair like this, they do not provide that in the kit. So what you're going to do is use that film, and it's going to create an air barrier, and that is what gel coat needs to cure properly. Now you guys, y'all see me use these little spreader blades all the time, and sometimes I will take larger spreader blades and I will cut them to the right size, and I kind of like, that's a couple fingers, couple and a half fingers across. I'm going to cut a piece of the clear plastic. And you're going to want to cut it to a size where it's well larger, a good bit larger than the total area. So what I would normally do, and again, this material is much thicker. I'm going to start from the edge. It's almost like applying window tint or some other release agent. We're trying to do it from one side to the other. We're trying to get all the wrinkles and the air bubbles from one side to the other. That will kind of flatten things out, smooth things out for you, and it will allow that gel coat to cure. Hope you guys can see. And it is a little overfull, or my dad would say it's a little bit proud. It's a little bit more than just the bare minimum, which is kind of what you need. Now you can sometimes shift a little bit of that out to the edges, but what you want is it to be a slightly overfull, because for one, usually you would come back and you can sand this. There you go. You can sand this with some, say, 600, 800, 1200 and get a polish on there. Also, gel coat does, when it cures, it shrinks a tiny bit. So it's better to have it kind of slightly over full than under full. Try to get it in one pass there. Generally, it's going to take a few hours for that to get kind of firm up. You should be able to feel when it's firmed up. It's going to depend on temperatures, but usually for gel coat repair, somewhere in like the mid 70s is just about optimal in most cases, with high 60s to mid 80s kind of being the best place for you to be when it comes to doing gel coat repair. Also a day when it's fairly low humidity, and if you can avoid being out in the direct sunlight when you're doing the repair, UV light or direct sunlight or warm surfaces are really going to accelerate how fast the gel coat is going to cure. So that is a general overview, and I imagine we're going to do more of this kind of stuff for you guys. Again, it's really hard to cover every topic and talk about everything without the videos going like over an hour long. But I want you guys to know how much I appreciate you guys watching the channel. It means a ton to me. So once again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching. It's Captain Joe here with Island Marine Charters, Fish Bump TV here on YouTube. And as always, we will catch you guys next time out.